Are you tired of doing everything right with your diet and still not feeling better? One missing piece, sufficient quality protein, can explain more than you think. Let's start with what matters most, the facts and the fix, so that if you only stay for a minute, you're going to leave with value. Most people think that they're consuming enough protein. Truth is, they're not. When your intake drops below what your body actually needs, you begin to see it in some pretty predictable ways. So for example, your thyroid function may become low. You may start to see anxiety and indications of low neurotransmitter function creep in, things like depression. There's also the possibility that you could see that your immune system is showing signs of weakness, that it's just not robust as it needs to be, and that maybe you're succumbing to colds and sickness more frequently than what's ideal. That's because you're not making immunoglobulins the way that you need to. Or it could be this simply that you just have blood sugar fluctuations. Maybe you notice that you're more moody or hangry than what you think is ideal for you, and possibly there's a scenario where you just don't have sufficient muscle tissue or you've lost muscle tissue, which is contributing to a slower metabolism. Guys, these aren't random symptoms. These are your body's warning signs trying to give you feedback of what needs to happen. And if those are the facts, well, let's talk about what the fix is, at least what the starting point is. And if you want your hormones, your immune system, your brain chemistry, your metabolic function all to work and be as optimal as what it should be, then you need to move your protein intake more towards about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Yeah, there can be some fluctuation in that number, but that's a good starting point to try to work towards. And that one single shift is going to do more for you than trying to implement a detox or trying to take a bunch of supplements that maybe you don't have a real focus with, or running a bunch of labs to try to determine what's wrong. Just start with a foundational concept of getting enough protein in. Now, as it relates to this topic today, guys, I am just getting started with this. And if you like where we're heading so far, then go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And while you're in there, go ahead and drop a comment and share with us if you've experienced some of these symptoms that you've been trying to figure out. Now, if you're new here, I'm Dr. Arland Hill. I'm a clinician and a rancher, and I see both sides, the physiology and the food. And when you understand what your body needs, I mean truly needs, and you choose food that is raised the right way, everything is going to start to change. So with that in mind, let's start to break down the 5 signs that your protein intake is too low and that your body's been trying to tell you. Oh, and by the way, I've got one bonus in here for you as well. Sign number 1 that your body needs more protein is going to be you're showing consistent presentations of thyroid dysfunction. Now understand that when we start to talk about the thyroid, we talk about the hormones T4, T3, thyroxine, triiodothyronine, but T4 and T3. But guys, that's not where this conversation should begin at, because you still don't make those hormones, especially T4, if you don't have good amino acid availability. The way that this works is that when you have low protein, that's going to translate into a lower intake of tyrosine. You'll see this referred to as L-tyrosine many times, but you're not getting adequate tyrosine and you're not getting adequate phenylalanine. These are the raw materials, the basic building blocks for T4. And if you think even beyond just not having the basic building blocks to build T4, when you don't have sufficient proteins, and I'm going to be more specific here for a moment, and you'll see why. When you don't have sufficient animal proteins, you're also leaving out adequate intake of iron, zinc, and selenium, and these are all required for thyroid hormone production at a structural level. They're required for the ability of the gland to be able to store that hormone, to release that hormone, for that hormone to get converted from its inactive to its active form, so from T4 to T3, and even for that hormone to respond appropriately and give the correct message when it gets to the cell. all those minerals are more readily available in animal-based proteins. So it's not just the amino acids here from the protein, but that's extremely important, but it's also those minerals that come along with that. And frankly, if you can't make enough T4, then you're going to stay in a at least functional hypothyroid state, if not an outright hypothyroid state, many times regardless of what your labs are saying. If the symptoms match up, well, you don't necessarily need a lab to validate that for you. The symptoms may be telling you everything. If you're asking yourself, well, what symptoms are you specifically referring to? Well, let me just share a few with you, and that is if you get cold easily, if you gain weight, even when you're eating what you would consider a clean diet, if your hair's thinning out, if you're getting thinning of the outer portion, the outer third of your eyebrows, if your energy and motivation are dropping off, if you feel like your tongue is too thick for your mouth, or you're seeing teeth marks in the lateral side of your tongue, these are all indications of you not having sufficient thyroid function. And when you begin to normalize these symptoms with getting adequate protein in, that's the direction. That is the foundational piece to optimizing thyroid function. Sign number 2 that you are not consuming enough protein is that you're experiencing things like anxiety, low mood, depression, any type of mood disorder. And maybe you even experience what we would call wired and tired, meaning that you can't shut your mind off. Your mind's constantly racing, even though you're in a physically tired state. So you're mentally amped up, however you want to say that, but you're physically worn down. This can be a byproduct of your neurotransmitters. Your neurotransmitters go by names like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, acetylcholine, although acetylcholine's not one of these protein-based ones. But my point here is that the serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, these are derived from proteins, which means that they need amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, to be able to be formed adequately. And so when you don't have sufficient amounts of protein, you don't have the direct precursor to be able to make serotonin. That's 5-HTP or tryptophan, as we would think about that. For dopamine and norepinephrine or adrenaline, that's going to take us back to the tyrosine and the phenylalanine. You can see why I'm giving you this sign 1 and sign 2 really closely together, because you use some of the same basic building blocks, same basic amino acids for thyroid as you do for some of your neurotransmitters. And even GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, this is going to have an L-glutamine component to it. And L-glutamine is a very significant amino acid in the body. It's a very significant component to your protein. But my point here is that if you struggle with your emotions not being stable, with emotional dysregulation, if you're struggling with sleep, if your thoughts are racing, if you experience irritability, these are the kind of warning signs that your body is trying to give you to say, you know what, maybe it's time that I start looking into having more protein in my diet, and maybe I even assess the quality of the protein that I'm consuming. Having anxiety and living through anxiety, being overwhelmed very easily by what would truly be considered insignificant things, getting frustrated with yourself or the people around you, not being able to wind down at night, not getting good sleep, getting easily overwhelmed by stress. Guys, these are all indications that it may be protein that you just need to start with. These are not ways to live your life. And rather than looking at whether it's a medication or a supplement or anything else, just start with the basic building blocks to make sure your body has what it needs. Regardless if you need some of these other interventions, you still need the protein as a solid foundation to be able to build from more efficiently. Now, the third warning sign that you're not getting enough protein in your diet is that you have a weak immune system. And this has everything to do with what are known as the immunoglobulins. These are your immune molecules. They are built from proteins. And when you don't have sufficient amounts of these immunoglobulins circulating, the problem is that your immune system doesn't have the ability to develop a specific response against whatever foreign threat that it sees. Low protein intake reduces the ability to make things like immunoglobulin A, immunoglobulin G, secretory IgA. That's one that's extremely important in your gastrointestinal tract. And the gastrointestinal tract harbors a significant influence over the immune system of the entire body. Think about these as part of your frontline defense. They're not the immediate response, but they're right behind that. And they're what allow your immune system to be able to adapt and become much more specific in the type of response that it develops. But that's also what gives it a huge heads up, or hands up, maybe I should better say, to overcome these different threats that it sees. It's what gives them a significant advantage. And if you're someone who is highly susceptible to infections, if you have a lot of food reactions, that would fall in this context, and you don't understand why that keeps happening, it may simply be that you just don't have enough protein coming in to build these basic immune system components that are going to allow you not to be the person who catches the cold every season. You know, the average person out there is catching 2 to 4 colds per cold season. That's a significant amount. That's a lot of downtime in your life. And these aren't many times just minor illnesses. These are big setbacks. If you add on to that, if you're extremely sensitive to multiple foods, if you just seem like you react to a lot of stuff, your gut gets irritated easily, you know, when you do get sick, you get run down, you get extremely fatigued very easily. Guys, these are the red flags. This is your body screaming back at you, eat more protein. Give me some help here. Allow me to be able to make these immune system molecules, these immunoglobulins, so that I can develop a more robust response. Getting more protein is absolutely critical to the immune system. Sign number 4 that you're having inadequate protein intake is that you're experiencing blood sugar swings and or constant cravings. And this is a big one. A lot of people deal with this, and many individuals will reach for that quick fix rather than acknowledging that in the prior meal or the next meal, what they really should be doing is getting more protein in. Protein is going to be a stabilizer for blood sugar, and it does that by slowing down how fast your glucose gets absorbed and regulating your satiety, how easily you feel full. It's interesting now that we have an entire class of medications that has so much attention called GLP-1 agonists, and they affect satiety. But it's interesting that consuming more protein in the diet also has the capacity to release our own GLP-1. And not to mention that this is also amplified when you're consuming real sources of protein, many of which are also going to have good quality fats coming in. So for example, if you're consuming pasture-raised meats or grass-finished beef, these are going to have optimal amounts of fat in there as well. And that fat is also going to support this overall picture of balancing the blood sugar and inhibiting the cravings. If you are not consuming enough protein, you can almost be guaranteed that you're getting blood sugar spikes, and on the backside of that blood sugar spike, you're going to experience a crash. And when the crash comes on, the cravings kick in because your body's looking for a quick energy source, and it's telling you, go find something to get the energy back up. And all of this creates this roller coaster process with your blood sugar that becomes driven by cortisol, driven by stress response. And this is where you see, like, if you start to see in the mid-morning, especially in the mid-afternoon, you're crashing, if the sugar cravings are kicking in. One of my favorites to really tell you that this is a problem, if you're the person that wakes up between 1 and 3 a.m. and especially between 2 and 3 a.m., guys, this is you. That's your body saying, I am not balancing my blood sugar adequately and I need to do a better job. Brain fog, mental fatigue. Again, this could be connected to the anxiety, that feeling of hangry. These are all signs that you're not balancing your blood sugar, and many times this is a byproduct of not having a fundamental amount of protein coming in through your diet. Sign number 5 that you're consuming an inadequate amount of protein is going to be muscle loss and slower metabolism. Now, if you don't have adequate protein intake, your muscle breakdown process is going to outpace your muscle building. We're always undergoing this breakdown and build-up process. And as we age, we want to try to, and we really want to do this throughout the entirety of our life, it's just a lot easier when you're younger. We want to be able to optimize having more of a building response. We want to truly nurture that building response in the body. This is called an anabolic response. But to do that and to get adequate amounts of muscle tissue development, which we know the more muscle tissue you maintain as you age, the better your longevity is going to be, the better you're going to age. You can't do that if you're not consuming adequate protein in the diet. Muscle is your primary driver of your resting metabolic rate. So if you're just sitting here, so just for right now, me just sitting here, what is in large part dictating my metabolic activity is going to be how much muscle tissue I'm able to maintain on a day-to-day basis. And if you have loss of muscle, you're going to lose your metabolism. Your metabolism is going to get slower. Everybody always asks, well, why does my metabolism slow down so much when I get older? It's because you're not doing what you need to be able to preserve your muscle tissue. Yes, you need to do the activity to stimulate your muscle tissue, but you don't have to do that activity at an exceptionally high level. You just have to be consistent with it and intentional with it. But what you do have to do on an ongoing basis is get the right amount of protein in so that when you do stimulate that muscle tissue, when you do initiate that breakdown process, that you're also following that up and giving the body the basic building blocks to build back that muscle tissue to give you direct control over your metabolism. So don't keep asking, well, why is my metabolism so slow? Or why am I losing strength? Why my clothes fit differently? All these things that folks like to say. You can moderate your weight. You can manage your weight with adequate amounts of protein because of how much muscle tissue you can harbor and build. And that muscle tissue, again, gives you direct control over that. And you may just simply acknowledge things like, I'm not as strong as I used to be, or my posture, I'm starting to slouch down in my chair. Notice those things. If you're less stable, you're more easily fatigued. And when you're trying to physically do something, I've said red flags a number of times, or warning signs throughout this video. These are the red flags and warning signs that you cannot ignore, that you have to listen to. Now, as promised, I'm going to give you one additional sign that you need to pay attention to. And this does tend to happen in older individuals, but it's not exclusive to older individuals by any means. So just keep an eye on this. If you experience puffiness or swelling, sometimes you'll hear this referred to as edema. This can be, especially if it's not explained. So I'm not referring to around an injury, okay? So that's another story. But if you are experiencing this, low protein translates to low blood proteins. And you need an adequate amount of your blood proteins to be able to monitor and manage your fluid balance. The water in the body is going to follow different concentration gradients. And if the concentration in the tissues is greater than that in the blood, then you're going to see the fluids start to move into the tissues and out of the blood. We want to keep that fluid in the blood. That's where we want to maintain that balance at. Adequate protein is what's going to help us do that. You can even see this using lab tests when things like what are known as albumin start to drop off. Albumin can be an early indication to say you don't have enough blood protein to maintain this concentration that I've been referring to. If you see things like puffiness in your face, puffy ankles, or in the lower extremities below your knees is a lot of times where you'll see this at. But some individuals will see this with their fingers swelling if they feel like they're just more generally inflamed, and that seems to be a constant state for someone. That can be an indication. Or, for example, your rings, going back to your hands for a minute, if the rings are fitting too tightly and you're noticing that consistently, this can all be an indication that your blood levels of your protein may not be sufficient, and that should allow you to start asking questions, or entice you to start asking questions of, is my dietary protein intake sufficient to meet my metabolic need? I've given you 6 clear signs of inadequate protein intake. Well, it wouldn't be fair of me to present the problems to you and not give you a solution. And fortunately on this, I've got a solution that is very, very straightforward in nature, very easy to implement, and it's going to allow you to rebuild with dietary protein by taking actions consistently and being very intentional in what you're doing. So here's what your body actually needs. Most individuals, right? And don't think of yourself as the exception. You're the norm, okay? Most individuals are going to need about 1 gram per pound of body weight. That's the target you should initially shoot for. You can adjust it from there, but if you're just trying to dial in a starting point, that's your starting point. This is the number that's going to help you restore hormone production. It's going to allow you to make your neurotransmitters better, have better mental function. You'll find that it's going to rebuild your immune system by helping you make those immunoglobulins again. It'll stabilize your blood sugar. It'll help you with maintaining your muscle tissue. But I want to go one step further with this, beyond just telling you that 1 gram per pound of body weight is the amount that you need to hit, right? So if you're 150 pounds, get 150 grams in per day. But I want to go one step further. And that is that I want to encourage you to choose complete proteins that are high quality proteins. Now, what does that mean, right? Because if you're going to make the intention to do what I'm suggesting for you to do here, let's fully maximize the activity. Let's be intentional. And to do this, incorporating in things like pasture-raised chicken makes a lot of sense here. Pasture-raised chicken, it's easy to digest. If you need a starting point of just getting more protein in, poultry is an excellent place to do that. You'll have adequate amounts of amino acids like taurine, glycine, anserine. You can look at some of my other videos to hear discussions about what the importance on those are. But what about getting grass-fed and finished beef in? Well, that's going to give you the iron, the B12, the zinc, the creatine, the carnosine, all the other amino acids. It's such a protein-dense food source, and it's so extremely valuable, and getting it in a grass finished form is going to be more advantageous because you're getting all these secondary benefits from it. Eggs are extremely bioavailable. Your broths, another easy starting point if you're just not getting sufficient amounts of protein. If you're just really low and you need to just get more in, start getting some broths in. Cook in broth, drink some broth. For right now, it's colder, at least at this time of the year that I'm shooting this video. That's easy to get in. It gives you collagen, gives you glycine. If you can work up to getting organ meats in, where you get a very dense amount of micronutrients, those can come in as well, right? But those are the types of proteins that you should be looking for, and just a way of thinking about how you would implement these. Try to distribute your protein evenly throughout the day. You may want to just simply front load breakfast with 30 to 40 grams, just to have a higher amount in at breakfast, because that's going to give you the opportunity to not to feel so pressured to get more protein in as the day goes on. And I would say at a minimum, try to get 4 to 6 ounces per meal. And listen, for me as the rancher, I know that we're raising animals right, and that we're not just producing meat here at this ranch. And I've made these recommendations for so many years now, and I've had the opportunity to directly observe patients that are taking these recommendations to heart and seeing what the impact is and how much of an influence it can have on their well-being, on their hormones, on their immune function, on their mental state. These are all the things that we're trying to amplify. And food quality, guys, it determines your biology. So make sure that you're not just grabbing any protein, but you're being intentional about the protein that you are grabbing. I am still blown away that so many people chase symptoms for years without realizing that they're just simply not eating enough protein. When you correct that one thing, all these symptoms that I've been talking about in this video, they all improve. Your whole body comes back online. It's like you become a new person. And if you feel like this information that I've shared with you today has helped you, well, make sure you like the video, and do feel free to share this with someone that you know is struggling as well. And if you want to go deeper into choosing the right proteins, especially why pasture-raised chicken and grass-finished beef perform differently than the other ones out there, well, go ahead and check out the next video on the screen.